Bible in a Minute, Ruth 1. When faced with death and famine, a Judean family leaves home to live in Moab, a land of hope and food security. But then the husband dies, and the two sons get married, don't have kids, then die. So now it's the Judean woman Naomi and her Moabite daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, three women made vulnerable by death, must now decide for themselves what comes next. Naomi's Jewish community has laws to help widows, but she begs Orpah and Ruth to stay in Moab. It's not too late. They can start over. So Orpah stays and Ruth goes. At the intersection of gender, class, ethnicity, and sexuality, the Book of Ruth inspires curiosity and critique.
Is it a triumphant tale of feminism and friendship? Is it a heartwarming lesbian love story? A model story of a model minority? Or a xenophobic confirmation of national hegemony? Is it a warning against intermarriage as an assimilist strategy to colonial power? Or a shattered illustration of a young immigrant woman hoping for acceptance and integration into a new land?
Yes.
Ruth chapter 2. So Naomi and Ruth have had it bad. Not only are they grieving, but the loss of their partners left them without means to meet their most basic needs. Ruth goes to the fields to follow behind the reapers to see if she can get a little grain to sustain her and her mother-in-law. She ends up in Boaz's field, who coincidentally is a relative of Naomi's. He inquires about her and realizes he already knows her story and her connection to his community. He makes sure she has enough, more than enough, both to gather and to eat to sustain herself and Naomi throughout the rest of the season. It seems the Beatles were right. We get by with a little help from our friends. What is your community like? Where do you see those stepping in to fill the gaps? And how do we all make sure that everyone has enough?
Ruth 3. Mother-in-law Naomi says to Ruth, I need to seek security for you. Boaz is our kinman. He will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. Naomi tells Ruth to bathe, anoint her body, change her clothes. Ruth is to approach Boaz at night after he has eaten and drunk to his heart's content. She is to lie down at the end of the heaped grain, stealthily uncover his feet, and lay down. Now, feet is not the normal word for feet. Connecting it to uncover hints at the connotation of sex. Startled at midnight, Boaz wakes up and asks, who are you? She says, Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak as you are my next of kin. However, there is another kinsman more closely related, and Boaz promises to settle the matter in the morning. Ruth spends the night, sneaks out with 6 measures of barley, and tells Naomi everything. They wait for Boaz to settle the matter.
Ruth chapter 4. This is the last chapter of Ruth. Remember, Ruth decides to remain with Naomi in this foreign land. But as two widows, they have very few rights. So this man Boaz is working to find a next of kin to take care of the two women, to marry Naomi. But he can't find anyone who will also care for Ruth. You see, Ruth was a foreigner and therefore undesirable. She was this pawn caught in this patriarchal transaction. But then Boaz agrees to take responsibility for the women and even to marry Ruth. This marriage between Ruth and Boaz sets the stage for David. Remember, King David. And they have a son, which means that this story that started with grief ends with life. This story that starts with exclusion ends with inclusion. So if it is so for this story, why not ours?